Fine. So in the last session we completed up to supplier merge. Okay, supplier merge we completed as a part of yesterday class. So we just configured withholding tax related setups, and we tested the process, bills payables, pay alone, and the foreign currency invoice payment process, and supplier merge. These are the concepts we covered. The relevant video I uploaded in the Google Drive. Hope you can access the same. If you have any issues, okay, please you can drop an email on this ID so that we can resolve it. If you have any issues to access the videos, please let us know. So in today's session, we'll see the interest invoice creation. Interest invoice creation. First, we'll see what setups are required, and we'll go with a simple case, say example, and we'll see how system will create the interest invoice when we make the late payment. Fine. So when I talk about interest invoice, the setups almost remain same as EBS configuration. I just will list out the required setups to implement the interest invoice. To implement the interest invoice solution, first we have to enable create interest invoice checkbox at invoice options. In case of EBS, we have a payable options. Within the payable options, we can find one tab called as interest. Under interest, we have to enable interest, create interest invoice, and we have to provide minimum interest amount, the interest related accounts. But here simply we can go and enable interest related checkbox, and there will provide the account also. We'll see that information just as a one of the setup. Okay, we can just make a note as say enable interest. Okay, or say enable create interest invoice checkbox at invoice options. Okay, so after that, after enabling, if we are enabling and create interest invoice checkbox at invoice option, that means we are enabling for our business unit. So after enabling for our business unit, this create interest invoice option we have to set for supplier also. In case of EBS, we set create interest invoice checkbox at supplier level, but in Fusion we set at supplier site level. Okay, just notice this point. So in EBS case, we set at supplier level. Supplier level we enable create interest invoice, but here we have to set at site level. Okay, so now we'll go to the supplier site. For which supplier site we want to apply the interest invoice creation when we make the late payment. Okay, so go to our supplier. We have a supplier called as Cloud Google INC, right? We have a supplier called as Google INC. Go to our supplier. First, we'll talk about the required setups. I think we're discussing about that. Say just first we'll list out. Say enable or else say set create interest invoice for supplier site. After that, we'll define the interest rates. So these are the basic setups we have to complete to calculate to create the interest invoice when we make the late payments. To test this functionality, definitely we require one invoice with a past due. But for our testing purpose, what we do is we'll create an invoice with a past date by taking the payment terms as immediate. So we'll try to make the payment with a today date where system consider as a overdue invoice, and it will calculate the interest. We'll go and create an invoice. Say create invoice with which date we can take 1st April. The 1st April will create invoice, and we will use payment terms called as immediate. So system will take the due date as the 1st April only. We'll make the payment with the today date. Okay, payment, or I'll say pay today. Okay, we'll make the payment with today, that is nothing but 12th. So for this 12 days system will calculate interest and system will create interest invoice. System creates interest invoice the moment we process the payment. So these are the setups we have to perform, and we are going to take this case, and the result would be interest invoice creation. Fine. So first we have to enable create interest invoice at invoice options. Go to our implementation project, click on setup and maintenance. We know all these navigations. So just go to task list, say manage implementation projects, and click on overview tab, which will display our project. Just click on the project, search for the task called as invoice options. Invoice options. Search for invoice options. The invoice options task is available from two different paths, financials and procurement. You can just go with the finance related path related task. Okay, click on manage invoice options. Click on go to task icon. Fine. We are in invoice options, which are specific to our BU. If you scroll little down here, you see interest section. Here enable create interest invoices checkbox and set minimum interest amount. To create the interest invoice, if interest is applicable, to create the interest invoice, what should be the minimum interest amount? So the minimum interest amount should be $10. And interest expense distribution account. When system creates interest invoice, which account system has to take to hold that interest related amount? That account you can specify here. So select account called as interest expense account. You can go with the search criteria as it contains. Say interest expenses. Say OK and say save and close. Fine. Our BU level we enabled, so interest invoice creation provision, right? We just provision to our BU to create the interest invoice if applicable. Fine. Now we have to set up for which supplier side this interest invoice creation should be applicable. So that we have to specify. Go to our supplier. How to navigate to supplier? Go to navigator. Within the navigator we can find procurement section. Under procurement we have a task called as suppliers. Click on suppliers task and go to task list. Click on task list and click on manage suppliers and find our supplier. What is our supplier name? Google Inc, right? Google Inc. Just click on search. We can find the supplier record. Click on edit. Okay. Now go to sites and click on edit. And go to invoicing tab. Site level, go to invoicing tab. Scroll little down. Okay. Under term section, you could see create interest invoice field. There we have to select as a yes. So yes, we want to create interest invoice for this supplier site. Okay, supplier site level we are enabling interest invoice creation as required. Say save and close.
Lakshman, that default option can also be used, right? Because it's going to
Sorry,
default automatically. That default option can also be used, right? Because it's going to default directly from the setup automatically.
which default option?
In the site, in the LOV, there was yes, no, and another option was something like default.
No, no. See that default that is a wrong value basically. See, I'll show you. See, because the product totally they taken from like the legacy is EBS finance only, right? So when they did the conversion into Fusion, they forgot to do some changes. See, the other option is default from payables options. Do we have payable options in Fusion? Payable options we have in EBS as a part of payables application, right? Okay. EBS we have invoice options and payment options. We don't have any payables options. So this is just from the EBS standpoint, they just taken the values, they didn't change. You can set as yes or no. Okay. So this is just not applicable, or else just so this they might have mapped with the function called as basically invoice options. If the name is invoice options, then that sounds right. So otherwise this is a wrong value only. See here all payables options. We don't have any payables options. We have only invoice options and the payment options. Okay, so that is a point you have to notice. Fine, done. So say save and close. Now we will go and define the interest rates. Okay, the solution remains same as EBS. The interest rates which we define, those are common rates. So if you want to maintain the rates supplier wise, you have to go with the workaround only. Okay. So there is no announcement they did for this interest rates to maintain supplier wise as a standard function. So we have to find the task called as interest rates. Go to our implementation project, or else from FSM home page also we can set up the interest rates. Right, if you want to set from project, we know the navigation. If you want to set directly from FSM home page, you can select search for a task called as interest rates. So manage interest rates. So already rates are defined. Make sure that the rates applicability is falling within the current period. So here we have rate April 1st 18 to April 30th. Okay, for April month rate already defined. Somebody set to 8.5. I'll make it 15%. Okay, if the date range is not falling with the current period, that you can set it up, or else you can say the same rate is applicable up to May ending. Fine. Say save and close. So rates also available. So now we're done with the setups. Now we'll go and create the invoice against the same supplier, Google INC. For Google INC, if you make the payment as a late payment, interest is applicable. That's what we specified at supplier site level. Okay, we'll go and create invoice with this date, 1st April, and we'll give the payment terms as immediate. That means due date will become 1st April only. We'll make the payment today. It's 12th April. So system will consider as a late payment, and it will calculate interest, and with the interest amount, system will create the interest invoice. Fine. So go to invoice workbench to create invoice with past date. Otherwise, if you have any invoice which we created with the past date, where the due date also past date, then that invoice we can use for making the payment. Okay, we'll go with this just case. It will be easy for us to test. Say create invoice. use defaulting because we set profile option. Our supplier is Google Inc. Okay, seems to supplier site level we didn't specify invoice currency and payment currency. That is the reason system is not defaulting the amount currency, invoice currency. So if you don't specify all the time, we have to select the currency. So instead of selecting every time we create invoice, so we'll go on to set the default currency for our supplier site. So go to suppliers task, go to task list, click on manage suppliers, and find our supplier Google Inc. Click on edit, go to sites, click on edit. Under invoicing tab we have currency selection as a controls. What should be the default invoice currency for the supplier site? US dollar. Payment currency US dollar. We know by default, okay, what are the invoice currency we have, the same currency system will take as payment currency. But here if you are going to deal with the cross currency payments, you can have invoice currency in USD, payment currency may be in the different currency. Fine, that will be testing anyway. So set default currencies at supplier site level for invoice and payment. Now we'll go and create the invoice. Go to invoice workbench. Within the navigator, under payables, click on invoices task. So this page you can call as invoice workbench or invoice work area. Go to task list, say create invoice. Select our supplier Google Inc. Just tab out. It's defaulting the currency, all the information. Now we can give the invoice number as IN01 and invoice amount is say $1 lakh, and date we can select past date, okay, so that we can test interest invoice concept. Create with the 1st April date, and system is taking the term date also same, so that the payment terms will get calculated from term date only. That due date will become 1st April. Fine. So enter line amount, same amount you can enter. You can select distribution set or we can enter manual distribution. So we created on distribution set, right? So that you can select. So now validate this invoice. So it's validated, no holds, unpaid, and due date is 1st, okay, 1st April. So if you want to account it, otherwise say save and close. We'll select this invoice for payment. From here also you can go with the painful option, or you can switch to payment workbench to process the payment for this invoice with the today's date. Go to payments task, which will navigate us to payment workbench. Click on task list, click on create payment. Fine. Select our supplier Google Inc. So select our bank details, Google corporate account. and payment process profile, Google payment process profile, and payment document. Now select invoice. We want to process the payment for which invoice. So for this supplier, if you make late payment, interest is applicable, right? Supplier site level, we specified that. So we want to process the payment for which invoice? IN01. Select, click on apply, say OK. Now you can notice here system is calculating the interest, $458.33. Fine. So now you can say save and close. System will trigger the process to create the interest invoice that you can find from invoice workbench. Say save and close. So with the document number 9, system process payment 1 lakh plus interest amount, total $1,458. Now switch to invoice workbench. Okay, click on recent invoices. Here you can see interest invoice system created. So IN01 is the original invoice number. It is adding suffix as a INT1, and invoice amount is interest amount is $458. So status is fully paid. Yes, system calculated interest, selected interest amount, and payment is processed. To support that payment, interest invoice should be there. So system created interest invoice. You can click on the number to see the interest invoice record. Invoice type is interest. Okay, same setups and same process if you compare with EBS. Fine. So the next topic here is recurring invoice. So recurring invoice, in case of EBS, we create recurring invoice template. From recurring invoice template, we can create the recurring invoices for each period. As a part of recurring invoice template definition, we have to specify we want to create the recurring invoices for how many periods, and that period specification also accordingly system will allow. But here recurring invoices we can create from spreadsheet. Okay, it's just the given recurring invoice feature as a spreadsheet option. So we can create the recurring invoices from spreadsheet. So we know what setups we have to perform if we are going to create the recurring invoice in EBS case, right? The same setups are applicable. Primarily we required special calendar in EBS. To create the recurring invoice, we required special calendar. The same special calendar here we are calling as payables calendar. That point already we discussed as a part of withholding tax in the last session, right? So now we have to create payables calendar. So create payables calendar. It's nothing but special calendar. As per EBS, we call as special calendar. In Fusion, we are calling as payables calendar. That's how they change the naming convention. Since we are using that calendar in the payables, just they named it as a payables calendar. So once this payables calendar is ready, we can create recurring invoices from spreadsheet. Say create recurring invoices from spreadsheet. Fine, we'll see this. Okay. So we are in the invoice workbench. Okay. So switch to our project to define the special calendar, or call it as payables calendar. Go to search. You can do it from project or directly from here also you can create. Okay, let's create from our project. Go to implementation projects. Click on overview, open the project, search for the task called as payables calendar. Okay, when you search for any task, it won't consider case. Okay, it will display. Click on the task name, manage payables calendars. Click on go to task icon. Click on create. So we can give the name as Google recurring. So already we discussed the calendar type. If the calendar we are going to use for payment terms, yes, we have to accept the same value which system is defaulting. Other than payment terms, this payables calendar may be for withholding tax or recurring invoice or key indicators. For other purposes, we have to select value called as general purpose. And period frequency monthly. And when you say monthly 12 periods, what should be the starting date for this calendar, that you can specify, say 1st Jan 1st 2018. Then period name format, and click on generate period. System will create periods automatically, right? So click on generate periods. System created periods for 1 year, current year. So save and close. Okay, the payables calendar is ready for recurring invoices. Now we have to go and create the recurring invoices from spreadsheet. So whenever we talk about spreadsheet, where we use for some transaction information, always we should remember the ADFDI is prerequisite. That already we installed, right? That we already installed. So far the ADFDI we have seen for the purpose of daily rates creation and invoice creation in the payables. Now the same ADFDI is required to create the recurring invoices through spreadsheet. To create the recurring invoices through spreadsheet, go to invoice workbench. Click on invoices task. Okay, go to task list. And here we have a task called as create recurring invoices in spreadsheet. Okay, if you want to see that name, you may minimize this. Now click on this. You could see that name, task name, create invoice from spreadsheet. Sorry, this is a recurring invoice. Create recurring invoices. This already we tested, right? So create recurring invoices. The third task. Okay, when you see this as a create recurring invoices, the recurring invoices we are going to create from spreadsheet only. Just click on this task. Just say okay. Say connect. It will ask us to connect to specific server. So we're about to connect to the following application URL, that is our server URL. Do you want to connect? Yes. So provide login credentials. So username is Google, provide password. So some version, client server version check. If you see this message anytime, just simply click on skip. Okay, now system will create the framework to create the recurring invoices within the sheet. So this sheet is connected with our application. We can just access the data from application through this spreadsheet. So select our business unit. Click on this drop down. Our BU name is We have a BU name as Google US Business Unit, right? Yeah, here we have. So Google US Business Unit, invoice number. So say we are going to create multiple invoices. So whatever the number you provide here, that system will take as a prefix. I'll say RI, recurring invoice. Okay, prefix it will take as RI and suffix it will take as the period name. So invoice amount. Okay, you want to create multiple invoices with which amount? So with $25,000. And who is the supplier? So it's just kind of some template kind of information. One time we provide. Double click and select our supplier. Our supplier name is Google INC. Select supplier and say OK. So here just notice the two star marks and one star mark. The one star marks says the field is mandatory. If you see two star marks, that meaning is at least one field is required. If you see here supplier and supplier number, between these two at least one field is required. If you provide the supplier number, system will default supplier name, or if you select supplier name, it will default the supplier number. Two fields we no need to fill. There is some dependency. That's what we have to understand. So supplier site, double click, it will fetch the supplier sites from the application. So we created only one site. The site name we given as INC site, right? INC site. And select invoice currency. You can select from the drop down here. You can click on that instead of going with this, clicking on drop down and dragging little down and select finding the currency. The simple process is you can enter the currency name directly here, USD. It will accept. Okay, enter with uppercase only. And payment currency, that's optional. Invoice currency system will take by default as a payment currency as a default, right? But no issues, we'll select. So calendar name, the payables calendar, nothing but special calendar. It's a mandatory, you have to select. Double click. Given the name as Google recurring. Select payables calendar for recurring invoice. And in EBS, what we do is we just normally we specify the number. Okay, we want to create recurring invoice for how many periods? You may specify 5. 5 means what should be the starting period we have to specify. But here, so you cannot specify the number of periods. It's all about selecting the range of the periods. Here you can select from period and to period. If you select so April to July, okay, then system will create the recurring invoices for April, May, June, July. For 4 periods it will create. Just we have to select period range. So double click, select current period. So for how many periods you want to create the recurring invoices, that period range you can specify. So you want to create for how many periods? Say for example you want to create for just 2 periods, April and May. Or else June, July, any just 2 period, any period you can give. For the entire range of the periods, it will create recurring invoices with the given information as a default information with the 25,000. So now you can enter the amount as a line amount. So we entered 25,000, right? Same enter you can. And purchase order. In the process of recurring invoice creation, if you want to match with the PO, you can provide the PO number. And if you want to specify specific line, you can specify the line also. Yep. Okay. And if you want to match with the receipt, yes, you can provide the receipt information. So scroll it till right. Here we have option distribution code combination, distribution set. If you come in case of EBS, so you can match with the PO, or else we have to select the distribution set. As a part of recurring invoice template, we cannot select distribution, right? Distribution set is required if you are not going to match that with the PO. But here you can enter distribution combination, or you can enter distribution set. Both are available. Okay. So we'll select distribution set. We have one distribution set, right? That we can select. We given the name as Google Expense. So that's all. This is how just you can provide the information. If tax applicability is there, like you can specify those details also. So we just given this is similar to the template which we define in EBS. Okay, we given the invoice number as RI, and we given the period range as a April to May. Now you can go to create invoices and say generate. Just click on generate. So on failure, continue to upload subsequent rows. If you have many rows in this, if any one row is going to fail, what about other rows? Yes, it has to continue to upload. Anyway, we have only one. Say OK. So the status is row inserted successfully. That means through payables open invoice interface, okay, system will import into payables application. The number of recurring invoices created is 2. Say OK. Now we can go and find those recurring invoices and payables. Go to accounts payables. Go to manage invoices. Okay. And here you can select our BU name. Google US Business Unit. Invoice number. We given prefix as RI. Let's try with this. Okay. RI1, RI2. Two invoices system created. So the 25,000, 25,000. Rest of process remains same. You can just open this invoice and you can go with the rest of standard process like validation, accounting. If any approvals are applicable, you can submit. So go to actions, click on edit, so that you will be able to perform required actions on this invoice. Okay, so let's validate this invoice. So accounting, post to ledger or draft, these points already we discussed. Okay, if you say post to ledger, it will create accounting entries, it will transfer to GL as well as it will post. Fine, that's all about recurring invoices. Okay, we can create recurring invoices from spreadsheet.
Is it possible, just out of curiosity, is it possible to create weekly recurring invoices?
Sorry, yeah, weekly, yes, you can create. In that case, payables calendar you have to create with weekly. That is the purpose of payables calendar. Even if you want to create monthly, even you have accounting calendar monthly, but still you have to create payables calendar for monthly. Payables calendar is mandatory. If you want to create weekly, create payables calendar with week base, and that you can include into this and you can create it.
Okay.
Yep. Fine. Yeah, please.
Okay. I want to confirm how we have two recurring invoices in our case. Is it because we've entered the to and from date from
Yes, yes, yes. That's
month of
the logic. Yes, correct. Each period we can create only one recurring invoice for one period from one template at a time.
okay,
So if you look at a
yeah.
recurring
And we
journal
can
in
say that
GL, you can create multiple in one period. But here, even in EBS also, the function works in the same way. That is applicable here also. Yeah, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
can we save that template and to our desktop?
Your voice is breaking.
Can we save that template to our desktop and we
Yes, 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 yes. You
can we
can.
save the template to our desktop?
Yeah, I
Say that
got
again.
your question. Yes, we can save that template to desktop, but whenever you go and open that, you have to make sure that already you have application session is open, and once you click on the template, it will ask you to log in, and that's how that the template which is on the desktop that need to be connected with the application. So then you can change the values, and again you can resubmit to create the invoices for other periods also. Okay, you should be in the active
Okay.
application session. Whenever you reopen that template which is
Okay.
on the desktop, you have to log in as a mandatory. You can reuse it. Fine. So any other
So
questions?
in the real time when you create multiple periods, so basically the business users go every period and select that particular period invoice and they validate and create accounting.
Correct, correct. Exactly.
Okay,
See, or else instead of creating for multiple periods at a time, they can keep the template ready. So whenever they need invoice for current month, they'll give from and to date as a current month only. Just only one parameter they'll change. Then
right,
click on create, done. So the template they'll maintain as it is on the desktop. So they'll in the next month they need one more invoice. They'll be giving the period range as a May to May. Click on create,
right.
there will be
Yeah.
period. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. So any questions on this two concepts? So we have seen the configuration process. Fine.
Lakshman, can the scheduling can be possible?
Which one?
Recurring invoice.
See, recurring invoice we are not doing within the application, right? This we are doing outside of the application with the desktop. So within the ADFDI templates, you cannot set anything as a scheduling. That we have to perform the manual action only. If it is a part of application, yes, we can schedule the job. Okay. So it won't work in that way. The scheduling cannot trigger this recurring invoice creation through spreadsheet. Fine. Now we'll see the third party payments. Okay. So to test these third party payments, we'll do the required configuration. We'll set up what's configuration is required. So and to go with the scenario, so we'll
Before you proceed to the next one,
please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that recurring invoice can be created through a spreadsheet, right? So
Yes.
is there any other way to create it
That's what we did just now. So no other option. No
other
other
than
option.
okay, okay,
Okay, only one option. In case of EBS, directly within the application only they given the form. Okay, but
correct.
here that just move to spreadsheet functionality. If you want to create this, there is no other option. Only this is the option.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Fine. Thanks. Fine. Now we'll see the third party payments. We know it's all about we get invoice from one supplier, but we'll be remitting the payment to other party, right? So here we have a supplier called as Google INC. So we'll look at that simple example. Say, so we received an invoice from Google INC. In that case, we have to create standard invoice, right? So standard invoice. will create against Google INC, say for $50,000, and say Google INC is informing us, please send the payment to some XYZ collection agency. Okay, say Google INC is appointed some collection agency to collect the payment from their customers. In that case, we may get instruction from Google INC to remit the payment to other party. Okay, so in that case, we'll be remitting invoice. Will have we create against Google INC, but we'll be remitting the payment to different party. So remit payment to, say, so party name is, I'll just use a Google only, or else we'll use something else. XYZ collections INC. So Google INC is appointed this organization as their collection agency. So we'll be remitting the payment to XYZ collection agency. Okay. So this is what we are going to test. So now we have to create XYZ collection agency, XYZ collection INC as a supplier in application, right? So first we have to create XYZ collection INC as supplier. So if you create XYZ collection INC as a supplier, then only we can create the relationship between these two suppliers or parties. Between Google INC and XYZ collection agency, we can create the relationship saying that behalf of Google INC we can process the payment to XYZ collection agency. That relationship can be built once we have the third party as a supplier. Fine. So after creating, we have to set controls for invoice process and payment process. To set controls related to this concept for invoice process, we have to configure the invoice options for these third party payments. Say configure invoice options for third party payments. The same we have to set for payment options also. Configure payment options for third party payments. And now we have to create the relationship between XYZ collection INC and Google INC. Say create third party relationship between these two parties. Okay, so once we complete all these setups, we can proceed with this testing. Okay, we'll create sub invoice against Google INC and we'll select remit to supplier as a XYZ collection agency. Because of these setups, system will support to process the payment to different supplier. Fine. First we'll go and create XYZ collection INC as a one new supplier. So you may click on done, or directly you can navigate. Just go to navigator. Within the navigator we can see the procurement section. Click on suppliers task. Click on task list. This you can call as task list or task panel or task pan. Click on create supplier. So we need supplier with name called as, okay, we discussed as a XYZ, right? Yes, XYZ collection inc. So business relationship already discussed. If you want to record the transactions, we should select relationship type as a spend authorized. So what this supplier falls under, which organization type with respect to tax, that type you can select. Just this is for information, doesn't have any functionality behind it. Just click on create. Now system will create supplier profile, right? We have to create address, site. The site we have to assign to specific BU. So profile is created. Now you can go to addresses. Okay. Under addresses tab, click on create. So 1 second, system is still browsing. Yes. Let me refresh this page. No issues. Again, we'll take the navigation. Just click on suppliers task. Go to task list. Click on create supplier. Supplier name. Already we created supplier, right? System created supplier. Now you can go to manage suppliers, find our supplier. Supplier name is XYZ collections inc. Just we created profile only, right? Just click on edit. So now we have to create address. Go to addresses tab, click on create. So you can provide address with any random text. I'll say collections inc address. That address belongs to which country? Select country as US. And address line 1, line 2, you can provide any text. Select postal code, any one of the postal code. Now set the purpose. Okay, so we may not place the order to collection, okay, say some collection agency that will be remitting the payment. If you want to enable ordering also, so you can enable so that you can create the POs also against this supplier if required. Fine. So select address purpose as ordering, means purchasing and remit to payment. So done. Address level you may set default payment method. Any one of the payment method you can select as default. Say check is default payment method for this address, because against the address only we create the site. What are the defaults we have at address level, those will be applicable for sites. Now click on save and close. So we know very well how to create the supplier. Already we created 2 suppliers, right? Fine. Go to sites, click on create, select address. The same name system will default here. You can change. Okay. Say site 1. You can save so that below tabs will get enabled. Just click on save. The same site purpose is defaulting here as a purchasing and pay. Under invoicing tab, you can set default invoice and payment currencies. At least you have to set invoice currency. System will take the same as a default payment currency if you don't set also. Now go to payments tab and verify the payment method is defaulting or not from this address. Yes, it's defaulting. Now we can assign this site to our business unit. So you can click on add and you can select, or else simply you can click on auto create assignment, so the current user is acting as a procurement agent for how many BUs. For all those BUs, this site will get assigned. Okay, as we defined, this current user is acting as a procurement agent for only this BU. That means this site will get assigned automatically to only that BU. Right? Click on auto create assigned. Now say save and close. So done. So we create a new supplier. Now we have to configure invoice options for third-party payments. Go to invoice options. So we have to go to our implementation project. So manage implementation projects. Just click on overview and open the project. Search for the task called as invoice options. Just click on manage invoice options. Click on go to task icon. Now here we have the third party payment related controls. So we can enable the checkbox allow remit to supplier override for third party payments. If you enable, so this options related invoice creation time, system will allow us to select so other party as a remit to supplier. Okay, so you can select, so that invoice creation time we can select against that invoice the payment we want to remit to which supplier. System will allow us to select. The same we do in case of EBS in the payable options. In the payable options under invoice tab we enable this checkbox, but here in the invoice options. So save and close. And the same we have to set in the payment options also. So payment creation time system will allow us to override if you set to yes. Go to payment options to set this third party payment related controls. So within the payment options for this business unit, you can enable allow payee override for third party payments, which will allow us to change the payee name at the time of recording the payment. So save and close. Fine, done. Now we have to create the relationship between these two suppliers. So from which supplier we have to create the relationship? We are going to create invoice against which supplier. From that supplier you can create the relationship. Now we are going to record the invoice against Google INC. We have to go to Google INC supplier. Within the Google INC supplier we have to specify behalf of Google INC we can send the payment to XYZ collection INC. This is what we have to specify. Invoice we are creating against which supplier, we have to go to that supplier. From that supplier we can specify the third party relationship. So go to Google INC supplier. Just click on suppliers task. Go to task list. And click on manage suppliers. Supplier name is Google INC. Click on search. You can click on the name, it will open, or else you can click on edit. So site level, okay, we have a supplier site. Click on edit and go to invoice tab. Scroll little down. Here you could see third party payment relationship. Okay, site level under invoicing tab. third party relationship. Click on add. So remit to supplier. So when we have invoice with this supplier, we can remit the payment to which other supplier, that you have to select. Which other supplier? XYZ collection INC. And what is the address of that supplier? It's applicable from when. Okay, you can specify this would be enough. If you want to make this as a default, you can select and you can click on default, so that whenever you have an invoice with this Google INC supplier, system will default remit to supplier as a XYZ collections INC. If you want to implement this kind of default, otherwise you can uncheck the default all the time if you want to default, so that we no need to select. If you go to payment workbench or if you are processing the payment, if you enable this default, so for all the supplier Google INC supplier invoices, system will select remit to supplier as a XYZ collections INC if you set default. Otherwise the field will open. If you want to select, you can select, or else the remittance also will take place to Google INC only, right? So this is a specification we have to give. Here we have to create the relationship between these two parties, or say suppliers. Then say save and close. We're done with the required setups. Now we'll test by creating these transactions. So create standard invoice against Google INC with some amount. Go to invoice workbench. Click on invoices task. Say create invoice. Our supplier name is Google INC. Invoice number IN02. So as we discussed, you may enter 50,000 or any amount. Enter line amount 50,000. You can select distribution set, or else you may select man distribution, specific account distribution. Okay, the line level. We are in line level. You can select distribution set in the line level, or else you can select the distribution combination here, line level. If not, from here you can click on distributions, where you can just do the distribution for this line. You can select the line, you can go to distributions. Now already you selected distribution set, the same distribution system will display. Otherwise, without selecting distribution set, you may select the line and you can click on distribution. From here you can add the multiple line distribution accounts for the invoice line amount. Okay, so now go to manage installments. So we created third party relationship. Because of that reason, system will be adding this third party payment section here. Otherwise, by default, you don't see any of these fields. So here you can specify who is the remit to supplier for this invoice. Only one we have, as we create a relationship. You can select. Then say save and close.
Sure, one question here.
Please.
Yeah, can we, in third party you have shown, we have one supplier. If we have multiple, we can select multiple suppliers.
Multiple, you can add over there. One we added. That means behalf of Google INC, we can process the payment to XYZ. The same way you have another collection agency which you appointed as a ABC collection agency. That also you add by following.
Okay, if I
all will come here. Anyone you can select.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, fine. Okay, so we selected, we specified here. Now you can validate this invoice. Okay, and accounting and all not mandatory to process the payment. Fine. Now switch to payment workbench. So go to task list, say create payment. So select our supplier, Google INC. Once we select our supplier, here it will be adding payee name. Okay, in the payment options, we enable the checkbox. Allow payee override at the time of payment. The actual payee is Google INC, but whom you want to remit the payment, you can select that XYZ collections INC if you want. Okay, select it. If you set as default, whenever you select this supplier, it will get defaulted. That's all. The rest of process remains same. Now we are processing the payment to XYZ collection INC. Where the invoices belongs to Google INC. We are remitting, we are sending the payment. If it is check will be sending to XYZ collections INC to the respective address. That's how it works. So payment process profile, Google payment process profile, and payment document, Google check. Click on add, and you want to process the payment for which invoice. So you can select that invoice. So our invoice is this. So here only we have payee as a XYZ collection INC. Say save and close. So this is how we can process the third party payments. Invoice we can have with one party. Finally we can remit the payment to other party. So if you want to have that kind of scenario, these are the setups we have to execute. Okay, that's all about third party payments. Any questions?
Well, we have the same concept in R4 also.
Yes, you are right.
Third-party payment?
Same we have. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Fine. The next topic here is cross currency payments. In EBS we don't have this cross currency payments functionality. So in Fusion they introduced as a new feature. We'll see how to set it up. So earlier we tested foreign currency invoice and payment configuration process. The similar setups are required for this also. So no additional setup is required. So in foreign currency invoice creation, what setups we completed. So we defined daily rates and bank account level. We specified the bank account is multi-currency account. The same we have to do. And at the time of invoice creation, you have to select whatever the currency you select as invoice currency. Same currency system will default as a payment currency, but you have to override and you have to select the different currency. We'll see that. Okay. So say cross currency payments. To implement this cross currency payments, similar setups when we deal with the foreign currency invoice and payments, what setups required same will be sufficient to implement this solution. Say define daily rates and say enable multi-currency account option at bank account. So the bank account what we are going to use, that should allow us to process the payments other than our functional currency also, right? Fine. Now, as a part of testing, what we'll do is, so we'll create invoice in one currency. So we'll create invoice in, say, USD in our functional currency only, but we want to make the payment in the foreign currency, which we treat as cross currency. Invoice in one currency, payment in the different currency. So make the payment in INR. So now we have to define the daily rates between USD and INR. First we'll go and complete that setup. So define daily rates between USD and INR. So we can create the daily rates from spreadsheet, right? Go to setup and maintenance task. You can do from project, or you can go with the FSM home page. You can do it from FSM home page by clicking on search. You can search for the task called as daily rates from here also. Daily rates. So task name is manage daily rates. Go to daily rates tab and say create in spreadsheet. Just click on the tab. So say OK, because we are able to connect to this function or spreadsheet because we already installed ADFDI add-on, like that plugin, you can say the file we installed, right? Exe file. So current user credentials you have to provide. Say skip. So from currency USD, anyway inverse also system will create automatically. You can take USD to INR or INR to USD. Conversion rate type, say corporate. From date, so 12th April 18. Just we can, for 1 day rates are enough. We'll create invoice and payment on same day. So conversion rate is $1 equal to say 65 INR. Go to create daily rates and say submit. Say OK.
I have a quick question here.
Please.
In the action, I see it says insert, but do we have other actions like delete or update here? I'm sorry, I didn't attend previous class when you talked about the delete creation.
See, delete in the sense you can just go and remove it. That's all. The sheet you can remove it.
Remove it and then submit it again? So
Sorry?
that would delete it?
No.
Yes.
See, if you notice, we are not fetching the data from application to here. Only that currency values we are fetching. The other rates and all we are entering. We are submitting the rates to our application. So from here you cannot delete it. Normally if you enter the data if you don't want to submit, you can remove. If you want to do any modifications to the data from application, you can do it. Okay. It's just adding the rate of specific currencies as a conversion, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we cannot use spreadsheet to delete
No.
if we added something
Purpose
or update.
we have certain concepts there you can use that functionality to delete. Majorly when you connect to interface data from spreadsheet, you can do it. So when we work on the conversions, so that you can see that is applicable. So when you get the data into interface before importing into base tables, if you want to delete, by using the same spreadsheet functionality, you can connect to interface tables, whatever the data available. If you want to delete, you can delete. But here it is not applicable. Fine. So when we have a data in the spreadsheet, that is there in that spreadsheet only. The data which we are finding in the spreadsheet is not from application to delete the specific record. Right. Fine. So we create a daily rates. Now we'll go and we'll make sure that multi-currency account is enabled at bank account level. Yes, that is enabled the last session to test foreign currency invoice and payment. The same we enabled. But anyway, we'll go and verify that. So go to bank accounts. Just click on done. Directly you can search for the bank account from this FSM homepage. Search for bank accounts. Our bank account name is Google corporate account, right? Search, find the same. Task name is manage bank accounts. Search for Google corporate account. Click on search. Click on edit. And if you scroll little down here, you could see multi-currency account. This should be enabled. Okay. Fine. You can say cancel. It's nothing but closing. There is nothing, no changes we did to save and close. Fine. Okay. That is also already enabled. Now we'll create invoice in USD and we'll process the payment in INR. Go to invoice workbench. So when you create invoice, within the invoice record itself, you have to specify you want to process the payment for that invoice in which currency. Go to invoice workbench. Say create invoice. The supplier name Google INC. Invoice number IN03. So we are creating invoice in USD. Okay. Say $20,000. So you want to process the payment for this invoice in which currency? That you have to specify. To specify that, go to show more. Just click on show more. So whatever the currency we selected for invoice, the same system will select for payment currency. That you can override. Okay, and select here payment currency as INR. If this is the practice you have all the time, where you create invoice in USD and you make the payment to that supplier in INR. Okay, if you are following this as a practice, this specification invoice currency and payment currency you can set at supplier site level as default. Supplier site level under invoicing tab, you can set default invoice currency and payment currency as USD and INR. That's it. Here you don't need to change. Automatically the same will get defaulted. Okay, just give this specification and rest of process remains same. Enter line amount, say $20,000. We are creating invoice in dollars only. You may use distribution set. Okay, when you process the payment, then the exchange rates will come into picture, right? Now just you are entering in the functional currency only, no issues. So done. Or else you can go with the painful action also. Anyone you can select. Or else we'll go with the painful option. Any process you can follow. You can select painful or you can go with the payment workbench. So create payment. So supplier Google INC. You want to change the pay is same Google INC only. The disbursement bank account, this account, and we want to make the payment to Google INC in which currency? Not in USD, in INR. Select payment currency as INR. select payment process profile, payment document. Now we have only one invoice. We have only one invoice with the INR, right? And if you go to this other tabs, you could see the conversion here. Since we selected payment currency as INR, system is just verifying the conversion availability, conversion rate type available corporate, and conversion date and the rate. Okay, the system is taking the cross currency rate type corporate. It is taking. Fine. So you can go to payment details and you can select the currency for INR payment. Now we have only one invoice with the payment currency called as INR. System will pay only that. Other invoices which we have for that invoice currency and payment currency same, that is USD. Say apply. Say OK. Done. So 20,000 invoice we paid 12,58,600 rupees. So save and close. Okay, if any variance reflects, that goes to realized gain and loss accounts, which we have in the common options. That remains same. So that's all about cross currency payment. No additional setups required. The foreign currency invoice and payment, what are the setups we do? With the same setups, you can implement this solution. Fine. That's all for today. So if you have any questions, you can stay back in this meeting or else you may drop from the call. And if any questions from anyone, please.
Yeah, actually, Lakshman, we have done. You have just created the daily rates and you have done for cross currency. But how this invoice is allowing different currencies for invoice currency and payment currency? Because normally, whatever the invoice currency defaults a payment currency.
1 second.
How we change?
1 second. So that's how they just, how it allows in the sense it will use a conversion. In EBS, they didn't build the functionality, right? They didn't build the functionality to happen in that way. Here they build the functionality, that's it.
Okay. But same as like foreign currency transaction.
Yeah, same as foreign
Only
currency.
changes?
When you talk about foreign currency, the invoice currency and payment currency should be the same.
Same.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
so application doesn't support. But
Yes.
just made flexibility. The transactions can be handled in the two different currencies as invoice and payment. Just
Okay. This is a new functionality. It's not in EBS. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not there in the EBS, right? So just it's a new function.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
In the fusion. Yeah. Fine.
Okay.
Any other questions, please? Thank you.
Next one.
Yeah, Kamal, please.
Company has it.
This is my very first time of participating from the very first start.
Okay.
And I don't have the video for yesterday.
Okay.
I could say to you that I followed your instruction. I've dealt with the.
Sure, Kamal. What I'll do is after this meeting,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 6.
No, Kamal.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I'll give a call after this meeting. Maybe after 5 minutes, directly I'll call you on this number.
No.
Fine.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fine. Any other questions? Yeah, Prakash, I'll just we'll have a call offline.
Cross currency invoice. Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, I can
If
hear
the
you.
user hasn't made the okay, I can. So if the user hasn't made the payment for the cross currency invoice at the end of the month, so how is it handle the difference in the rates?
See, the rate when it will come into the picture when you make the payment, right?
Correct.
So you created an invoice today. Okay, today you take the same case. We create invoice in USD. Do you think conversion is required for invoice? Invoice level we given. Invoice currency is USD. Payment currency is INR. When you create invoice, do you think conversion is required?
No, only when we make the
When
payment.
it is required? Payment.
When we make payment, yeah.
They will make the payment end of this month or say 20th. On 20th, you have to make sure that rates are available. Since we are testing today itself invoice creation payment, we created rates today with the today date.
So if the rate is, let's say, if the rate is changed when I'm making the payment, how is it handled at that time? So let's say when I created the invoice in USD, at that time USD to INR rate is 65, but when I actually made the payment, it changed from 65 to 66. So does we calculate the realized gain or loss, or does it
No, here
not consider it? Like
no. That realized gain or loss will come into picture if you have a different currency here, not functional currency. Just it will do the conversion in this case. In case of the different currency, foreign currency, then that realized gain or loss will come into picture. So in the last session we discussed right here. See, we created invoice in INR. Our functional currency is USD. You created today. The conversion is 65. And you are going to make the payment tomorrow. Conversion is 65. So if you pay today for $1, you have to pay 65 only. If you are going to pay tomorrow, it becomes 65. For each dollar, one additional INR you have to pay, right? That would be realized loss. 1 rupee we are paying extra. But here when you are paying, how much INR you have to use to pay $20,000? That's it. That's how you can handle.
okay. So that concept is not applicable in case of currency. But what we do in the foreign currency transaction stays same as EBS.
Yes, correct, exactly, same. This cross currency is new, that's all. That remains same.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Fine, any other questions from anyone, please? If no questions, we can wind up for today.
Lakshman, so regarding this yesterday's error, which I sent an email, I have assigned the immediate payment term which I created, and I assigned a reference data set to the payment term. But still, I'm used to get the error.
Yeah, I mentioned in the mail also, I mentioned by default system look for immediate payment term. To get
it means system defined immediate only we need to assign?
Yeah. You have to select immediate also along with that. So whatever you created, that you may ignore or you may include, but as a mandatory, you should have immediate within your reference data set mapping. Say you created 10 payment terms. Okay, 10 payment terms you assign to your RDS. Okay. So what system will do is, along with this 10, okay, you are assigned. Whenever you assign this reference data set for your BU, okay, system will, from this BU, if you do some setups or any process, it will look for immediate. That is a serial one. They made it as a just default for every BU related setups and all. So that is the reason. Say you created 10 and 10 only you assign to your RDS. Then if you go with the process of setups or anything, you will get error. So in the error message also I shown, right? I just outlined it. Okay, the message says the immediate is missing. Of course, you didn't create, you didn't assign, you are not interested, but still system will look for immediate.
Okay.
Yeah. Include immediate to your RDS, then try to do that activity, you don't see any issue.
Yeah, yesterday I did it and it's working fine.
Yeah.
But
same point you have to understand. They made it as a mandatory. They made it as a just mandatory assignment. immediate.
Yes.
Yeah. The reason why they did is, I'll tell you. The reason why they did is, we have a certain setups which we can load automatically. So in that process, okay, if no payment term you created and all, so that process will fail. That is the reason immediate they made it wherever the payment term is required, it would get defaulted. So if you are creating your own, like you have to assign this. If you are not creating your own, system will use always common reference data set. So for common reference data set, this immediate is assigned. That's how it works by default. Okay.
In real time also the immediate will be available. So no need to create.
Yeah. That is a standard. That is a standard that common and enterprise reference data sets you can see in any environment, any instance. The rest you can create as per your requirement.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine. Any other questions, please? Fine. No questions. So we'll connect tomorrow, same time, and we'll continue from here. Okay. So we just done up to this cross currency payments. In tomorrow's session, we'll see the holds, how to create holds, reasons, how to apply, and we'll test it. And supplier refund process. Supplier is going to refund the amount whatever we processed as advance. How to just work on it. How to create the custom roles. In EBS, we create the custom menus, right? The same way how to create the custom roles. So far we have seen the seeded roles, what Oracle is providing for GL and AP and few other. Now how to just verify which role has which privileges and how to compare two roles, how to copy the role, how to create the role from the scratch. These points we'll be discussing. After that we'll look at invoice approvals concept. Okay, that's how we'll just keep moving on one by one. So any questions from anyone, please? Fine, no questions. So see you tomorrow. Have a good day and good night. Thank you all. Any issues you have with instance or videos access, please drop an email on erpt.com@gmail.com mail ID. Fine. Thank you all.